welcome back to Pokemon Platinum. We released Celestic Town, which has plot, I guess.
Is this the one with all of the monuments to the legendaries and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where wise old people live to tell you about stuff that's relevant. And it has like 3 houses, so it's not much of a town.
Well, I mean, all the old people live there, so nobody else wants to.
I mean, it is a representation of Japan, after all.
Wait, do all of the old people in Japan just all live in one spot?
No, it's more that all the non-Tokyo or very big cities are basically losing all their population because all the young people are trying to go get work, so these more rural towns are just old people.
I'm sorry. Did you just get a pair of edgy sunglasses that make dark Pokemon more powerful?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
This franchise is dumb and great.
Hi, grunt number 37.
I like how every single Team Galactic guy has the same identical Mo Howard bowl cut.
I
mean, all grunts all look the same, so...
What I like is the 5-year-old drawings of Dialga and Palkia on the door right there.
Well, cave paintings and stuff generally do look like that.
Yeah, just regular Gruntmon is nothing special.
Yeah.
Well, they do have, like, fire types and stuff that's relatively uncommon for a grunt or whatever. So
Occasionally. I just wish they wouldn't do that thing where the grunts all have the same Pokemon.
Yeah, a lot of Pokemon games have that problem.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's... Like, I don't know why it keeps happening, though, because considering that it is one of the more frequent criticisms of these games is that many of the enemies feel very similar in terms of the teams that they use. And there's no, like, hard and fast rule that says that every grunt needs to have, like, the same 3 Pokemon, you know? So...
I get why they do it from a game design standpoint. Because, like, in theory, if you see a specific type of trainer, like, on the road, you can think, oh, hey, that trainer is probably going to have this type of Pokemon. I should bring this type of Pokemon. And you can prepare accordingly before stepping into their line of sight. But, the problem is that you fight a lot of the same kind of trainers. A lot of them.
Yeah, so I don't... You see, I'm completely okay with that in an instance where it's like, okay, you see a hiker on the route. The only thing is that not only when you're fighting grunts, you're fighting like a whole giant group of them all at once, is the other thing. So
yeah, so that's why it tends to be more annoying in that case.
It's a bit weird. But yeah, now we're gonna get vague plot. Vague plot.
It's just like, oh, you see, this is something where I just, this is something that I understand that I feel like I'm in the minority on, and I understand that, but I'm not really a fan of how the Pokemon games after Gen 2 felt like they needed to increase the scope to such a huge degree in terms of, like, what the Pokemon are and what the legendaries specifically, in terms of, like, what they are and what they're capable of. Because in Gen 1 and Gen 2, generally speaking, the legendaries were just kind of there. Nothing said that you had to go and get Mewtwo or Articuno, or even in Gen 2, Ho-Oh and Lugia are completely optional encounters. You don't ever have to go and bother with them at all. You're told about them, but they're just kind of, they're just something for you to explore, and it's part of what makes the world feel so alive.
I did like that Mewtwo had a backstory, but it wasn't one that was super important.
Yeah, I like that too. And I don't have a problem with, like, Pokemon having backstory. I guess the thing about it is that I feel, personally, by trying to make the Pokemon and the legendaries more epic, quote-unquote, they make them feel less like they live in the world.
They feel more ham-handed, yeah, in a lot of cases.
Yeah, because there isn't really many cases of legendaries just like existing in the world past Gen 4 specifically. Like, I
Yeah,
guess
I mean, like-
Heatran is the only one I can think of that doesn't have like some big event tied around it.
Yeah. No, Gen 4 has tons of event mon that don't really mean anything.
Yeah, and a lot of them are hard to get too. Like, you have to transfer up the Regis in order to get Regigigas, who I think is universally considered the worst legendary in the series because his ability's freaking awful. Like, because it's
Yeah.
Regigigas who has the ability that
Slow start.
Yeah, his stats are bad for the first 2 turns of the.
But then they
of the
become
fights.
but then they become amazing, which doesn't matter because if you're taking 2 turns to get going, you're dead anyway.
In Pokemon, yeah. So, yeah.
It's stupid.
Yeah, it's
but it
pretty
is
dumb.
what it isn't.
Yeah.
Mhm. You see, if you had more options, that would actually be a really amazing ability.
Yeah, there's a lot of abilities that in Pokemon that you think would be like result in being an interesting choice, but for the most part, it just means that the Pokemon is pretty
A
much
gimmick.
unusable after the fact. Like
Pokemon is not a very flexible game. It's a very rigid combat system here.
that's actually a good way to put it. Yeah, because
Yeah, you don't have any party members to pick up the slack while you do tactical things. You have one party member, and if you use an item for that turn, that's all you can do that turn. If you switch out a Pokemon for that turn, that's all you can do for that turn. And meanwhile, your enemy is wailing on you.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very rigid. If you break out of the established things that work, you're probably not gonna win.
Yeah, because the ability I was specifically thinking of is called Defeatist, and a Pokemon, the fossil Pokemon from Gen 5 has it. And basically how that ability works is that its stats are amazing when it's at high health, but as soon as its health gets below 50, its stats get dropped by half. So it's this Pokemon with really good stats that you can't ever let get hurt once, pretty much. So it ends up with the Pokemon being not worth using because as soon as you take even the smallest bit of damage, it becomes terrible, pretty much. There's less chance for... It's weird because I like that they add in fun little gimmicks like that to some things, because a lot of other RPGs have fun little gimmicks like that. But, again, because of how rigid the system can be, the battle system, you can't... Taking a chance is not usually worth it.
Yeah, you know, there's always been some things about the battle system that have bothered me. Like, why is it that... Okay, I have a trainer and I have a Pokemon. Why can't they both do something on the same turn?
I guess it's just, you know what? I'm not sure. Like, it probably had something to do with balance for the competitive kind of thing, but... In terms of logic, it doesn't make sense.
If I can do 2 things in a turn, so can my opponent. It's not exactly unbalanced when the rules are fair.
I guess that. Well, I mean, in terms of competitive battling,
Like,
you're never
you
really
know-
allowed to like use items in trainer battles anyway. So I guess it doesn't really.
Oh, well, yeah, but like, if I had healing items, you know, why can't I say use a healing item or a buff item on the same turn that my Pokemon does something? It would certainly make them more viable as things to actually make use of.
Yeah, because I can think of a lot of instances where I'm like, okay, I'm going to heal my Pokemon, and then my Pokemon
You immediately
takes as
take
much...
a damage. You immediately take all that damage back on the same turn. So it's like, why did I even bother?
Yeah. Oh god. So it's I wish that there was more room to use some of those fun little strategies because one of the it's like in Final Fantasy VII, for example, you can use Cait Sith and be fine. You know, like I know Cait Sith isn't generally considered
He's not a good party member at all.
Good party
but,
member,
you know,
but you can use him.
Yeah, but you've got 2 other party members. So if you've got one member of your party who's a little subpar, it doesn't really make any situation unwinnable. You can go and take like the worst party member ever into the fucking super boss, and if you're good enough at the game, you can win.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's just I really like those kind of fun RPG tactics because one of my favorite series, as you guys all know, is Dragon Quest. One of my favorite characters in Dragon Quest is Torneko from Dragon Quest IV, and he's a play on the traditional goof-off character from that series, where basically it's like a character who's purposefully bad, like they're literally a jester, and sometimes they just won't do anything in battle. But in Dragon Quest IV, they have him, he will randomly, some turns, goof off, but that goof off will have a random beneficial effect. So, for example, sometimes randomly he will trip and fall, but that fall ends up making him do a critical hit. Or he'll tell a joke to the monsters, and if the monsters think it's funny, they'll spend the turn laughing instead of fighting. Like, I love Dragon Quest because that sort of stuff is all over the place. Or like he'll do a little dance during his turn, and he has a higher evasion rate for that turn and stuff like that. So, I mean, yes, you would be more consistent if you just put like Ragnar on your team instead, because he does everything Torneko does but better. But it's more fun to have the random fun effects just to see what happens.
That's a thing in Fallout as well. There's a trait you can give your protagonist at the start, which basically just increases the odds of everyone in the game having critical failures. So if you put that on your character, the entire game just becomes a mess of horrible tragedy. Like,
he is the main character. He has plot armor.
Like, critical failures, everyone, including you, can have. So you're more likely to try firing your weapon and then drop it. Or the example H-Bomb brought up in his video was that your dog can mess up at attacking so badly that it breaks its own leg.
But there is value to that, because if you're fighting enemies in groups, a lot of the time they're more likely, it's more likely that one of them will fail versus you failing in that. So there is some strategy to it.
Somewhat, yeah. But like when I say critical failure, and I brought up the example of dropping your gun, this happened to me in game, and I didn't even have this ability on. If you drop your gun, you have to spend a turn picking it back up.
Oh yeah, that's a thing. Does Fallout run on D&D rules, or?
I think it's GURPS. Is it?
GURPS.
It's another tabletop system. Yeah.
Jeez, trying to play GURPS on a tabletop is like trying to get your teeth pulled. There's so many rules.
It is a very special game. Yes.
There are so many rules. Oh my god.
If you cast a spell on a Tuesday while it's raining,
then you find Peekaboo in the Seafoam Islands. Yeah.
When did this game become Pokemon? Hey, it just says so in the rule book.
Man.
Did you even get the joke just now?
No, I didn't.
I'm
no,
sad.
sorry.
I said it's a very special game.
Yeah. No,
the
we
stat
didn't
system.
get it.
The stat system is abbreviated with the word special.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What is it? Strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence. What's the A?
Agility? Question mark.
Agility. Yeah, that's it. And then luck.
Okay.
With these ancient powers combined, you become the champion of magic, known as Shazam. Wait, special.
Captain Special. So is it Fallout 1 and 2 that run on GURPS, or does 3 and 4 do that too?
3 and 4 still use the special system, but I'm not sure to what extent the other rules play in.
Okay.
So, because 1 and 2 are tactical turn-based. Every turn you move your character and do an action.
I know that 3 and 4 are like real-time, but with some turn-based stuff.
They're basically first-person shooters, essentially, but you can go into a time-freezy, you target specific areas mode, where you'll attack and have specific accuracy percentages depending on
but
what you
95%
target from how far away.
65% accuracy, you're like 2 inches from his face.
Well, you can fire multiple times in one use of VATS. So even if you have like
miss every time, what?
If you're aiming for their head and you have like a 30 or 40% chance, if you just aim all your shots at their head, you'll probably hit at least once.
Yeah, frickin' XCOM accuracy, where you're 3 feet away and only a 40% hit chance. Like what?
Well, depending on what gun you're using, that's actually pretty accurate.
He's 2 feet in front of me. I just have to point in his general direction now.
Yeah, and he just has to move away.
Yeah, but you see, it's weird because I know that like the turn-based stuff in RPGs, and this goes back as old as like version 1 Dungeons and Dragons. It's supposed to be a representation and abstraction of a real fight. So people aren't supposed, like, if you were watching this in real time, people
they aren't
aren't
actually standing in a line.
And bonking each other on the head.
Yeah. Like the amount of damage you do in an attack isn't just a representation of how strong you are. It's also a representation of how good they were at avoiding damage.
It's like no, they're not actually just standing there and waiting for their turn in initiative order, but at the same time, like, we've kind of it's still like, but he's 2 feet in front of me.
It gets weird when the production values get higher, I'll say that. But
Yeah.
it gets even weirder when you're playing something like fucking Morrowind and you have an accuracy rating in an action combat system where you can be swinging your sword at a bandit right in front of you in a first-person melee mode and you'll still miss even if your sword is like visibly touching them. I don't understand why they did that. I don't think they understand either.
He briefly became incorporeal.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's exactly the way it was in Daggerfall when everything was 2D sprite work. But it made more sense visually there because you couldn't quite as clearly see the contact between
the sword doesn't clip through the sprite in the same way in a 2D game.
Yeah, so if you miss an attack in Daggerfall, it just looks like you swung past the enemy and they were slightly too far away. But if you miss an attack in Morrowind, it looks weird.
Man, Elder Scrolls 6 is gonna be a trip. Yeah, because I feel like the internet's gonna go bonkers. I think.
Well, you know, I'm apprehensive, but I'm also excited because I like the Elder Scrolls games, and I don't quite get as pissy about it when Elder Scrolls does things that aren't as optimal for roleplay as I would if Fallout does it, because Fallout just has those 2 really good games that came before that I feel like they should be trying to live up to.
Yeah, but I feel like because Elder Scrolls and Fallout are kind of a different situation.
Yeah.
Because like Elder Scrolls, I feel like had a reputation for being janky up until Oblivion and Skyrim came out when they really became big, versus Fallout had this reputation for being very tight games before 3, and I mean 3 did make it more mainstream, but
it's not necessarily a matter of jank versus tight design, although that is a thing. I wouldn't exactly call the early Elder Scrolls games smooth gameplay experiences. The thing is that Elder Scrolls' big draw was always that it was a big, massive sandbox world that you could explore to your heart's content. You know, so when that's the main draw of Oblivion or Skyrim, I you know, that's in line with the franchise. Either you like it or you don't. When you get to Fallout, when you get past Fallouts 1 and 2 and then go to 3, and you find that 3 is a lot more of a post-apocalyptic Elder Scrolls game than it is a Fallout game. Fallout's main draw was the story and the role-playing, and how well that all tied together. It gets a bit disappointing. You know?
Yeah. It's okay, though. Maybe they'll release another good Fallout game eventually.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Or they'll patch in the good stuff later, like NPCs.
And quests.
I see what you did there.
Man. Do you think... Did people pick Fallout 76 back up when they added that stuff? No?
I
Okay.
don't know. I never even played it in the first time.
Making a really shitty game slightly less shitty isn't going to bring people back. Sorry.
I mean, it worked for Final Fantasy.
Well, Final Fantasy 14 completely restarted is the thing.
Yeah, Final Fantasy 14. They had actually multi-step restoration for that game, so it wasn't just a reboot. After Final Fantasy 14 was badly received, they made it free to play. They made the 1.x free to play, I should say, and then they added updates to that to make that experience better. and then they had the whole meteor event that rebooted the world. So
Yeah, and it took a couple of years before, like it was
yeah,
at least a year or two before they
there
had
was
Realm
this
Reborn.
there was this whole big process to them improving the game and then rebooting the game and then regaining acceptance with A Realm Reborn. And even now, they're still improving the game because, you know, design-wise, the expansions are better than the core game. No question. They don't make a lot of the stupid decisions that the core game did, like playing cutscenes in multiplayer dungeons, where your party is just going to skip them and not let you watch them, even if it's your first time. God damn it. But the the game is also getting like larger and more open now because they gave up on the PS3 version, which was like the PS3 version really limited the map sizes in the core game, which actually has an ironic good effect on the game in the sense that the map sizes in the non-expansion areas aren't as large and intimidating. So it's an easier MMO to get into. But then you get into Heaven's Word and Beyond, and the maps just get frickin' ginormous, and it's like, wow, the scope just really got bigger. And
that
it's
actually
kind of
is
a wow moment.
That is an accidental good game design thing because you start off with something manageable and then move into the big stuff. So
yeah, it's not like World of Warcraft where boom, you big open world go.
That was actually, you know what? That was actually something that Breath of the Wild did really well in that the plateau that you start off exploring feels really big when you first start off, but it's limited enough that you don't get overwhelmed. And you have to do that before going into the big world.
Yeah, that's a design method that open world games sometimes use. The Witcher 3 and Horizon Zero Dawn both do that thing where you're contained into a smaller open world area that nonetheless gives you a lot of freedom, and then you get through the first story section and you can go everywhere else.